Well, if you were expecting the meta to settle down and the best maybe 2 or 3 heroes to rise to the top, I have bad news for you. That's not the way this cookie is crumbling. And the meta is, well, as open as it has ever been. And that is so cool and crazy. I personally very much enjoy it. So let's break down the RTN meta as we see it from day 1 and week 1 to week 2. So if you missed last week's video, we broke down the numbers for the week 1 meta and the wins shared between all of the RTNs. And it looked a little bit like this. Kudos and shout out to LSS for putting out a really sweet looking graphic. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Kano took the most amount of wins because everyone disrespected Arcane Barrier, and then Dash showed up and showed out, followed by KO and Dromai and Victor taking the top 5 spots. From there was a very short fall off to Bravo, Dorinthia, Kasai, who's showing up and showing out as well, and then Katsu kind of just hanging out in the back with Azalea and Prism taking 3, and then a lion's share of other heroes picking up 1 to 2 wins apiece. That was week 1, and if you were expecting those sort of metrics to stay the same, well, let's take a look at week 2, because they didn't quite. Victor goes up a lot and picks up 10 wins off of the back of just being one extra week into testing and figuring out how the deck works. And spoiler alert, he's a Guardian with a value-based game plan, and that's very good into just Flesh and Blood in general. Numbers equal good things, which is why we always try to make numbers go slightly higher. And look at that, we're gonna hit 19,000 pretty soon. Numbers going up, that's a fun time. And Victor's numbers went way up. KO went, by the way, from being the third or second most wins shared hero here with 8, up to the second most with 9. And that is not surprising if you've been playing in the meta at all. KO is quite powerful, very solid, just damage output, and then has huge spike turns, and only very rarely suffers at his own hands from discarding poorly. That is like literally his big downfall, and perhaps disruption as well if you're playing against something like an Azalea that can disrupt your turns and your hands. Outside of that, he's just really, really good. And then we have the biggest gainer, I would say, on the second week here, and that's Sir Bolton, Breaker of Dawn, picks up 8 wins. And if you would have told me Sir Bolton, Breaker of Dawn would be the 3rd highest placing hero this week, I would have said, I don't see it. I don't see it, but I will say I understand why, and congratulations to those that picked it up. For those that don't know, Sir Bolton, very, very good into heroes that run attack action cards, and very good at doing big combo turns if you're playing Sabers, and very good at tempo if you're playing Raiden. And honestly, he's just been gaining more and more prominence and power since the end of last year with the Realm Rumble, and even perhaps slightly before that. After the rotation, of course, of Icelander, he's continued to gain a foothold in the meta, and this is like a coming out party right here. That's pretty impressive. Bravo being another good Guardian, and people just running the more aggro list with the Tunic takes 7. And then, like I've been saying, if everything above her looks like it does right there, Dromai is in a solid spot in the meta. I have heard multiple people tell me that KO is a tough matchup, and after playing it multiple times, both in person and on Talishar, I would say KO is an unfavored matchup for Dromai, but it is not a death knell, and she can definitely win, and it is definitely possible. And yes, KO, if they get unlucky, it is favorable, I would say, almost favorable, if they can get unlucky for Dromai if you're playing more aggressively, or if you're playing a measured approach, but Dromai does not feel like a huge dog into that matchup. And then everything else above her feels, honestly, pretty solid. It feels pretty solid. I suck on Dromai into Bravo Showstopper though, so I desperately need to practice that matchup, but I will say the rest of that feels pretty good. And Levia's right behind her. Levia was, I believe, sitting at 1 win last week. Yeah, she's way at the bottom of the list. It's a little hard to see her name, but she just skyrockets up there into 7 wins this week. Azalea also goes up. Azalea was, I believe, sitting at 3 wins and now up to 5 wins. And I've seen a couple of people starting to change the way Azalea is built. And I would also say this, in the meta that we're looking at right now, not many people are running Warmonger's Diplomacy, and it did make Azaleas change the way their deck list functioned, with Warmongers being out there and sort of rampant, if you will, or easily slidable into the sideboard. With that card not being around, then Azalea is almost just free to come out and play a lot more. And the same thing is true with Viserai. Even though Viserai does not pick up a win, there are rumblings that Viserai is out and about. And I think part of that is because we no longer are seeing people splash in the Warmonger's Diplomacy, which is just so funny. Alongside Azalea, we have Kano picking up 5 more wins, still showing that he can get it done, even though people are seeing him as the front runner in week 1 and probably cited in a bunch of AB. In fact, I will tell you right now, I picked to not play Kano. In my RT in this past weekend. I picked to not play Kano because I expected so many people to run AB and just sideboard Oases and things like that in their sideboard. And so I said I would put it out there as a possibility because I have fun with him, but this was not the week to run him. And yet, even when you did, there were still 5 people that picked up wins. So congrats on picking up wins in what I would probably say is the most difficult week going forward. And then we have Kasai just continuing to just show consistency. That's kind of what her deck does, is be incredibly consistent. It like always presents 8 damage. Like there it is. That's what Kasai does. And you know what? She picked up 5 wins, and then she picked up 5 wins. Katsu goes up slightly, picks up 5 wins. Reinar goes up a lot. I think he had 1 win to 5 wins. Dash drops heavily. This was the biggest loser of this weekend, in my opinion. Prism, Awakener of Soul, hovers around the 3 as well, and then a smattering of other heroes, Dorinthia, Phi, Max. Olympia picks up a win. Max, by the way, is also, I shouldn't skip past Max. Max picks up a win as well. Azuri and Vincent also picking up wins as well. So let's kind of take stock of where we are and talk about the biggest winners and the losers from this week. So sometimes when I get bored, I try to make things, and this is a poorly made but functional spreadsheet that charts out the week 1 and week 2 RTN wins. You can see it off there at the side. I have it all kind of charted out and organized. I do have an aggregate page with just a mess of you can look at this. This is actually funny. This is literally the line graph, and I'm prepared for week 3 and 4. This is the line graph of weeks 1 and week 2 of the heroes bouncing around. But let's look at this one. Here's a chart to show you the wins and how they moved from week 1 and week 2. So here's Bolton, for example, went from 1 win in week 1 all the way up to 8 wins in week 2. I know we could represent this in so many different ways, but I like the view of a line graph showing perhaps the trajectory of where it might be going. And he's a huge big winner of the weekend. I would also say, look at Reinar. Reinar's a big winner, going from 1 to 5, and another just massive winner. Where is she? You know her, you love her. Levia, look at this, goes from week 1 all the way to week 2, 1 win to 7 wins. Huge changes there. The heroes that you would expect kind of to just do well are like your KOs, who are just consistently staying week 1 to week 2, 8 wins to 9 wins. Victor as well is staying. Where's Victor? Down at I should have organized these by name. That would have been so much better. But I was organizing them by a bunch of stuff. Week 1 is 7 wins, up to 10 wins. So continuing his upward trend. I would be surprised if this goes down. I think this is going to continue to be high like this and continue to kind of go, not necessarily off the charts, but I expect him to continue to put up numbers and wins because he's just going to continue to be figured out. Kasai staying even. Bolton, like I said, is one of the biggest winners in my book, just absolutely showing up and showing out. And I would also say I was really surprised this week by Katsu. Even though Katsu didn't move much from 4 wins to 5 wins, the trend upward, and there were a lot more people playing Katsu around than I expected, straight up than I expected. I think Katsu's actually doing okay for himself. Now, dip downs, we've got the same wins on Dromai, which is a very big deal because it's 7 wins apiece. And this chart unfortunately changes dynamically, the scale on the side here, the y-axis, and so it looks like she's low on the wins, but she has 7 wins apiece, which is quite nice. This is what I wanted to talk about, though. Let's show, where is she? Where I probably at the top. Dash goes way down, one of the biggest losers of the week. I thought Dash would be quite well positioned into a meta with Guardians and the like, and well, she might be still, but unfortunately she did not put up the numbers to prove it. And there's a real possibility that she is being hated on and hated out by KO and other brutes that have the chance to run smashing performance. If that is the case, they can just take your equipment, and that does not feel good. Plus, I guess technically, with Dromai continuing to do well and Kyloria being an on-hit take your item, yeah, that might be a problem as well. So it's not like I wouldn't say it's a terribly bad matchup either way, but there are variables that you're not happy with if you are the Dash player, and it definitely showed this past week. Other downward trends, if I remember correctly, this was a pretty big downward trend. Dorinthia plunged down from week 5 wins in week 1 to 1 win in week 2, but perhaps that's not as indicative of anything, because if other people were maybe pivoting to other warriors like Kasai to try and figure out their RTN things, still 5 wins to 1 win is a big move indeed. The other big drop, and this one doesn't even show particularly well, there's 12 wins in week 1 all the way down to 5 wins for none other than Kano. But at the same time, do remember that Kano is probably the easiest hero to hate out of the meta, because LSS has created a get out of jail free card. In fact, they've made multiples, but the most easily accessible one is the generic one called Oasis Respite, and that card is your get out of jail free card essentially against Kano, where you basically just don't have to learn the matchup and just play that card. So people just decided probably to put that card in their deck and or in their sideboard, I should say, and now they have a big change on Kano. Plus, do keep in mind as well, Kano is very difficult to play, and it could be that after 12 people win their first RTN on week 1, if they go to another RTN, perhaps they pick up another hero and try it out and learn the reps. So there could be also some movement for multiple of these heroes that could be indicative of people just getting their win on their best hero or on their comfort pick and then trying things from there. But those to me are some of the biggest winners and biggest losers. Everyone else feels like they're moving in a more natural progression. Again, this chart is kind of crazy looking, but if I just do weird things, like the biggest drop here is Kano. There's another big drop there. We got some fairly big moves if you're looking at this hero right here, Leviah, and then Bolton moving up. Those are the sort of storylines from this weekend. Those heroes picking up some big wins and making some moves. So what would I run into week 3? Well, at this point, we're starting to get to the point where people want consistency and they want to figure out how to pick up their RTN wins and their PTIs. And so something like a Kasai feels very consistent to me. You play Kasai into this meta. Kasai feels like it doesn't really have a terrible like auto lose matchup unless you're playing against Dromai, in which case it feels like an auto lose matchup. I know, I've tried. From both perspectives, actually. It feels quite good from one and quite terrible from the other. Dromai is also showing a lot of consistency from week to week and high on the power level with high wins. So if you're looking for a hero to pick up and you have the capacity to play either of these heroes, those seem like pretty solid picks. It would behoove me to also mention KO. He's like one of the biggest point getters. And here's the thing. I think the meta is going to become reductive towards KO, and I think everybody knows it. The question is, when does it start to happen? And I think it might start to happen in week 3 because people want to start locking up their RTNs. And so if that's the case, people start picking up KO, and then your question is, well, what can you do against KO? KO can lose in some ways to their own poor discards, and they can also lose to disruption. So if you can play a hero that has on hits, maybe like a Victor, or also maybe like a Bravo, and you can disrupt their hands and hope that your disruption gets the cast bones, you might see something there. And then the other thing to think about is Azalea as well, because she has perhaps the most disgusting, disturbing, painful, and other superlatives disruption in the game. And, well, she gained a little bit in wins this past weekend, so you might consider picking up Azalea as well. Those are my thoughts and my tips going into week 3. So let me know and let everyone else know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to mess around with this, I'm going to give this to my patrons over on Patreon as a thank you to support the channel, for supporting the channel. And if you would like to become a patron, oh, it would mean the world to me. It means so much to me. Hey, if you're going to go to an RTN as well, tell me in a comment below which one you're going to go to, and then make the number go slightly higher so that we can all have a good time celebrating RTN wins together. If you make that number go up, you will probably win your RTN this weekend. I think that's how that works. As always, thanks for watching.